I'm happy to play with you, but I need to really fix your forehand because it sucks. And there are studies showing that people who play a racket sport live 10 to 15 years more than people who don't. If I had known you, John, I would not have been number 600 in the world, but I would have made it to the top 50. Some countries are going to already select at a very young age and send them to academies based on these genetics.
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about two different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they're wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com. And when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes. Sifu Slim here, and today's a really important message for people about what to do with their time in this world. A lot of us read self-help books, and that's, a sign of the 1970s through now. Part of the reason for that, in my estimation, is that we used to learn those things from our uncles, from our fathers, our mothers, our older siblings, the neighbors. If you're growing up on a farm or you're growing up in a tenement housing, there was lots of sharing of time so that you could learn how to function. You could learn how to butcher a hog, you learn how to plant a garden, you learn how to put a new axe handle on an axe. You learn about relationship, what the role of a woman is, what the role of a mother is, father, son, all these types of things, husband, wife. And along the way, we got a little bit separated, probably starting in the 60s and 70s. And so the idea of the me culture and the independent person. And now that independent person, they're wandering around through the world. They've got a big work life. Maybe they've got a spiritual life and a fitness life and eating life, all these things that we do, travel. And we've got to figure out what we want to do to advance our learning, right? And so how do we do that? Well, years ago, you used to have the book learning. So I always got a book going. I try to read a book a week, and I do a lot of reading on the internet. I watch a lot of documentaries. I watch a lot of interviews. And lately, my love is tennis. And so I'm learning the modern game, which I didn't know, of course, when I was growing up. It came along with Agassi, Pete Sampras, and now Roger Federer, Djokovic, and all the modern players. Alvarez from Spain came up with this new forehand. The Kyrgios from Australia. All these people are constantly advancing the game. So that's wonderful. So now I want to bring in someone who's very involved in the learning and self-improvement part of life, Victor Bergonzoli, who's in Florida currently. And tell us about your geographical history, Victor, and then lead us up to why you moved to Florida. So start maybe where you were born and then work our way through your geographical history.
Good morning, Sifu. Nice to be with you today. I was born in Switzerland, the French part of Switzerland, and from a Hungarian mother and a Swiss father who was himself, had Italian blood and French blood, but was born and raised in Lausanne as well, in Switzerland. Did my youth in Switzerland. That's where I grew up. went to University of Lausanne, and very close to my hometown. That's, I was from a small village in Switzerland. And then worked in the bank, Credit Suisse. In the bank, I went to the German part of Switzerland in Zurich, which is a different culture, as you know, Sifu. And then from there, I went to work for a telecommunication company, went to India for 2 years. I lived in India in 97, 98, learned a lot, and came back to co-fund a company called Dartfish with some colleagues and friends, and did that for many, many years. And that company brought me to the US. So I moved with my wife first for 6 months originally, and that has been 22 years, by the way, the 6 months, to Atlanta, north of Atlanta, with this company called Dartfish, with our 2 kids. And a few years ago, I met one of your high school friends, or no, college friends, Robert Mazzucchelli, who was, setting up SportsEdTV. And that brought me to Miami. So I moved to Miami as the CEO of SportsEdTV in 2020, June 2020. So it has been almost 3 years now. I'm in lovely Miami.
Très bien. Est-ce que tu peux regarder dans la caméra et non mon image?
Ah, sorry. Yes.
Merci beaucoup. So we are 2 French-speaking people. One grew up speaking French, and yours truly started learning French when he was 12. And I did 20 years of French, lived there for 20 times, 3.5 years total in France. I'm going there this June. I really love France. After France, I started going to Spain. And after being in Santa Barbara, California for a while, I moved to Austria. And Austria has been my destination in the summer for 4 years. This past year I didn't go, but this one will be 4 out of the last 5 years. I will have been in Vienna, and I love Austria. And I love wandering the hillsides, seeing the rain, seeing the Alps, and being around good food and cleanliness. The Austrians are very cleanly, and they're not overpopulated. So it's a time capsule for me. It's like going back to my youth and on the East Coast of the United States, back to the 70s and the 60s, where there was lots of space available and lots of open grounds and cows. And Austria doesn't have a lot of sheep, but they definitely have a lot of cows. And then bighorn animals. I guess they're like a caribou type of a thing. Elk out in the mountains that people go hunting in the forest. So one of the things that happened to me a few winters ago in Florida, 2 winters ago to be more specific, is I'm hitting at the range before I'm playing a really good course. It's the course where Tiger Woods and John Daly and these people play the annual father and son tournament in Orlando. And it's a really nice course, a really nice hotel, etc. And I'm on the range before we're going out to play, and I see these 2 people next to me who are tall, younger athletes. One guy aged 22 and one guy in his early 30s, and they're really blasting the ball. And I was known as a long hitter for a 170-pound guy who was a pretty good hitter. And these guys are really hitting it far and true and beautiful. So they turned out to be my playing partners. And after the first hole, I realized I'm playing with people that can shoot par and birdies out there. And I said to the one guy who looked extremely good, the 22-year-old, I said, "How long have you been playing? Were you on the high school team?" He said, "No." He said, "I've been playing for 6 months." And I said, "You got to be kidding me." And so as we go throughout the day, I see him hitting drives that are 330 yards, which is, the strong pros, that's what they do. And he's hitting these low drives that low, and then they come up at the end. They're not like a high lob. They're these screaming shots with all kinds of lag. Lag means you lag behind the shot. And I said, "Did you take lessons in the last 6 months?" He said, "No." And guess what he told me, Victor?
You went on the web and watched some videos.
YouTube. He
Yeah.
went to YouTube, and he got to be, and the other gentleman playing with us knows golf more than the young guy because he'd been playing it since he was, 6 or 8, and he was on a high school team that was very good where everyone could shoot in the low 70s. And he said, this guy we're playing with, his ball speed is in the top 3 of all PGA players. Can you imagine that? This guy's been playing for 6 months. He's as thin as I am. He's got a wider set of shoulders, but front to back, his pecs to his back is thinner than me, and I'm a thin guy. And he had a higher ball speed than most of the pros on the PGA Tour. He couldn't believe it. I said, "How did you do that?" He goes, "I have a lot of lag, and I watch videos." And he said, "I was always a good athlete, and things came easy to me." So there's a new generation of people who, because of YouTube, this is my guess on how it happened. I was trying to think of before our conversation today how this guy knew to pick golf, right? Anybody can go out and try golf, but I'm guessing that the inner brain, the neurology of the human being can look at something. They can look at a guy doing woodwork. They can look at a guy making etching marks on a rifle stock. They can look at golf and they can go, I can do that. And that's what this YouTube with the tens and millions of videos out there, it can show somebody something, and something inside of them goes, either I want to do that or I can do that, or the best scenario is I want to and I can. And that's what's happening to this world of people within 6 months hitting like a PGA player. So tell me if you've heard this story before, if you've had those thoughts and what this is all about, Victor.
Well, I think he's an outlier. You know, we know the rule of the 10,000 hours before you master something. What I heard is approximately 2/3 of the people are visual learners. And when I was growing up, I was a young weightlifter, Olympic weightlifting in Switzerland. At the age of 14, I finished top 10 in the national championships as a junior. And I remember one thing is you learn the best when you watch somebody who does it well. And that's visual learning. Now, back then, we didn't have a lot of video cameras. They're very expensive. So you learn by watching, then you do it with someone, and then, the person corrects you. So by watching on YouTube, you may have some outliers who are going to be, wow, I watch and I can learn, but you still need a coach. I think, a good coach who can give you the feedback you need, because most of the people are not going to be like your friend. That being said, yes, I think the power of video is just amazing. And what we have seen, the iPhone came out in 2008, 7, and that has completely revolutionized how people share their experience, teach, and learn. And YouTube is the same. YouTube came approximately at the same time, that 2005, 6, 4, something like this. And people sharing how teaching and how to do things in any topics was just a revolution. There's been a revolution. Now the danger is YouTube is fantastic, but how do you know if what you're watching is right? And I have a good example. My son, when he was 6, wanted to play lacrosse. Came to me, he's like, "Dad, I want to play lacrosse. I'm from Switzerland. We don't play lacrosse in Switzerland." I said, "Vince, I support your choice, but what about soccer? What about something I know where I can really help you?" And he said, "No, I really want to play lacrosse." I said, "Okay." So what did I do as a dad? I went on YouTube and I looked for videos of good lacrosse drills I could do with him. I found one that had 2 million views. I'm like, okay, that must be good. 2 million views, it can only be good, right? Otherwise, why would people watch it? I sent that to his coach, and his coach was a former Division 1 player, really good. And he said, "No, that's horrible." I'm like, "Coach, got 2 million views." And he said, no, don't do that. And he said, I'll send you a few. And he didn't. That's the challenge, is where do you find the right ones? And that can be the challenge. You could spend time learning, but you don't know who is good or not, especially when you have millions of experts, so-called experts. So that's the biggest challenge.
That's interesting that you said that you need a coach, because I've always believed in coaches. I think one of the things I share with people is that, yes, a lot of people go to counseling in the modern era. And if I had to guess, I would guess that 95% of them go for psychologists for a crisis situation or an ongoing problem. Not that many people go for prevention. And so it's unfortunate, it's unfortunate that it costs so much. If you want to go in person, the person has to have an office. They have to get to their office. They have to get their insurance, do all their continuing ed, and be able to live. I've been living in California. It's very expensive. Now, you think $300 an hour is expensive to pay for a counselor, but compared to a surgeon, the psychologist is not making very much money. And if somebody cancels and they didn't have the program where you pay ahead of time, they've just driven for, whatever their commute is, and now they don't make any money. So all these things are things to be taken into account. Along the way, the psychologist had another person come in, which was the life coach. And they're two different things. They have lots of similarities, but if you look at the literature on a psychologist, the history in the West, and I would guess that Europe is pretty similar, is that the psychologist is about 20% speaking and asking questions and about 80% listening. Now, if you go to a life coach, which I am, I would guess that it's more interaction the whole time, not a 10-minute piece coming from the person that I'm coaching. It's more interaction, like a normal conversation, which is a little bit different than a counselor in a psychological field. So this life coach walks in. Now, me studying tennis, I've been working on the modern game, and I've also been working on trying to find more power in my serve. And I'm a very fitness oriented person. I've been doing that my whole life, and I think I've gotten better at it. Even though I've gotten older, I've had to get better at the movements, the functionality, the balance, the technique. I'm just lower on testosterone and muscle responsiveness as compared to when I was in my 20s and 40s. My peak was probably when I was in my 40s in terms of martial arts, et cetera. I was 48 when I did my best, because I had all that learning and fitness kind of, they both met at the same time. But today, after trying to fix my tennis serve with some coaches and some online stuff and a lot of self-practice and trial and error, the coach that I was with today, he said, you have to get the angle of your racket not to here when you're in contact, you have to get it to here. So instead of just doing a kick serve with a pronation out, on all of my serves, I have to get the angle to here. My first toss into the court, leaning in, I did that, and it was like a miracle happened. I got goosebumps on my arm. At age 60, I thought my serve was gone. I wouldn't be able to get any power. And the guy taught me one tip, and this cannon came out of me, and I felt relieved, and I got the goosebump. And you got to have a balance of all these things. So maybe take us into any anecdotes from your own personal life or your coaching of your son, or some of the responses that some of the people who have videos on SportsEdTV have shared with you about the breakthroughs that have come about from this balance of coaches and videos and books.
Yes. So Robert, our chief marketing officer and chairman, was a pro player. After college, he was, number one at Richmond, as you know, and he went to play on the tour for a year or two. And he realized that he could not make a living because he was not good enough. When he met our director of tennis, and he's the co-founder of SportsEdTV, John Eagleton, they went to play tennis. And, Robert was like, well, I used to be a pro, let's play. And John Eagleton started playing with him. And John Eagleton has been working on the modern day forehand and, tennis for many years. And he said, Robert, I'm happy to play with you, but I need to really fix your forehand because it sucks. And Robert was like, what? In 30 minutes, he fixed his forehand. And that's, basically what we put in our videos on tennis is how do Nadal and Federer and Djokovic and all these people really play the modern day versus, what a lot of things have been taught for many, many, many years. And I didn't play tennis growing up, and I started playing tennis when I joined SportsEdTV. Because John said, Victor, you need to learn the tennis game. And I love it. I mean, I'm a bad player, but I learned. I'm not as good as your, friend after 6 months, but I really enjoy it. I think I have the proper technique. I learned a lot by watching the videos first, because what he said, okay, we're going to go on the court. I'm going to help you, but watch the videos that we publish on SportsEdTV. And obviously, I've watched, every sport that we published, and it makes things much easier. So when you don't have access to necessarily a good coach, or you have a bad coach, and that can happen, by knowing to go to one place where you know that the teaching is right, it's going to help you. And it's going to help you as well find the proper coach. So Robert, in 30 minutes, fixed his forehand, and he said, if I had known you, John, I would not have been number 600 in the world, but I would have made it to the top 50. That's how, and then you regret. You're like, where were you when I was playing? And by the way, John is a 4-time All-American. He was number 3 in the world as a junior. So he knows his stuff. That doesn't mean because you're a good athlete that you're a good coach. But that's a story I love telling, about coaching. And, one of our co-founders, Robert.
What is the age difference between John Eagleton and Robert?
8 years.
8 years. John's older?
Yes.
How do they do now when they're playing?
Extremely well. I mean, you can feel the age difference, but I think John is technically more talented, so he can make up for Robert has maybe more speed. But when they work out and they play for 2 hours, it's intense. Wow. And it's a pleasure to watch them because they go cross court, like.
Yeah.
So
the thing I remember, I was with my friend Todd. We were big supporters of the men's tennis team. We would go up and play, and we went at it. My friend Todd played in high school. I was been a fitness guy and grew up around a lot of different sports, but we went at it. My friend was better than I was, but I kept working on it. And then we'd watch Robert and the guys on the team, and we were very impressed. And it was very entertaining to watch them and to see these guys come in from other schools that had Swedish champions on their team, probably people from Hungary. That was the beginning of the era of the Europeans. I think probably in the 70s was when a lot of the people from around the world started getting scholarships to the United States universities. My university, University of Richmond, we had probably at a high of our international track team, we probably had 3 people from England and probably 12 people from Kenya on our track and cross country team. And, the 4 people from Kenya had to stay in America for 4 years without going home to see their family. There was no budget to go back home, and many of them stayed afterwards. But the running ability these people had compared to the people who grew up in America who were not Kenyan, it was a significant difference in some respects. That we had some athletes who were on their level, but in terms of these 12 people, they were pretty darn excellent runners.
And I have another example. We just launched pickleball last August, and never played pickleball until we did the library. So we went to a private court, became friend with the house owner, and they are a wonderful couple, and they have a private pickleball court. And the first time I went, for a few weeks, played with them once in a while, and then I stopped, and then we were releasing the videos. And obviously, I'm watching every single video that comes on SportsEdTV. So I'm watching a lot of drills and tips. And last time I went, they're like, wow, Victor, what happened to you? Did you play in Miami? I'm like, no, I really watched our videos and they saw the difference. So again, when you make a video, it has to be a storytelling. But we always say, try to bring a few points that you are going to learn. And that's how you film. You really film the teacher and telling the coach, imagine you have your students in front of you and you want to pass a message that is simple where you're going to learn something. And by the way, all our videos are taught, are coached, and we film them by top people. Either they played professionally or they were coaching at the highest level. And then, when we film, if they are not right on the point, we ask them to repeat because coaching the right way is important. But that's another example of how video can help. Now, nothing's going to replace the fact that we have to play. I'm not going to learn the piano if I don't have a piano and learn and play. And again, we're not trying to replace coaching, but we are trying to help even coaches who don't have access to the proper training. You can be a great coach and not a so good player, by the way. But we are trying to help coaches, parents, and athletes.
The other thing that I think is important in the development of the human athlete is to realize where you are and your advancement potential and your advancement desire. So when Bjorn Borg retired at age 26, a lot of people were mystified by that. But he had already put in 15 years of hardcore tennis. And that's a lot of time to dedicate yourself to something to that extreme level. If you watch on YouTube videos of him, he's about my size. I call it the era of skinny tennis. McEnroe, Connors, and Borg were all thin people back in the 70s. And you could look at many people before that. Tennis, there are a lot of thin people in that sport. And Djokovic is pretty much my build, about the same weight. And I'm very happy that he made it so far. And he's got a power game, and he's got a very determined game. I would say he's the most outlier, even more than Federer is Djokovic, to do what he does. And if he didn't miss the events because of his COVID vaccine issues, he would already be the champion of the most Grand Slams. So I think he's even more of an outlier than Federer, although I think Federer is the most graceful ballet style tennis player of the top 10 people since the age of video. We don't know what they look like in 1920, but there've been some really ballet and graceful people. But when I look at these people, I think, how did they know at age 6 or 8 or 10 that they could do this? And then in the conversations with someone who's on your platform, Coach John Brody, Broudy, I encourage you to go to his website, brodytennis.com, and look at him and then watch the video we shot about 10 days ago, which is on my channel, The Real Show with Sifu Slim. And you'll hear about his work ethic. He's a little bit older than I am, so he was playing a lot of tennis in the 60s through 80s, trying to be competitive. And what did his coaches tell him back then? They told him, work harder, do more hours, hit more balls. Now, he did it. He followed through. He was very determined. And if you compare that to Jimmy Connors and John McEnroe, they didn't hit more balls. Borg did. Borg did more workouts. Lendl did. Hit more balls, did more workouts, got more massages. On Lendl's case, I don't know about Borg and massages, but Borg used to put on a backpack with his coach, Lennart Berglund, and he'd run up the sides of hills with a backpack with books or weights or something in there. And he had a really low pulse. He had a pulse like a marathon runner. He had that focus, determination, and he didn't let his emotions get away with him. So he was a really interesting athlete to follow. And then you go to Connors, and Connors did a YouTube video within the last few years, and he says that when he was training, he got it down. I don't know how many people that were his hitting partners on the other side. Maybe he had two people that were hitting against him, but he got his training down where he could do it, what he says, in an hour, what it took some people to do in 4 or 5 hours. I'd like to hear a little bit more corroboration from the people who watch this, but I have no reason to doubt Connors in his 60s telling the story, maybe even 70s now, about that. So this whole idea of getting your focus, your training, the right recipe for the right time in your life. It's going to be different at age 22 than 24 for all these athletes. So tell me how that experience that I'm sharing here is important in your estimation, Victor, and how we have to be open to realize when we have to change things up and try a different route.
Well, it's an interesting topic. To go to the first point, at what age do you know if you're going to be good at one sport or not? And that really depends sometimes on the genetics. I mean, most of the time genetics. If you want to be a gymnast and your parents are 6'5", most likely you're not going to be a good gymnast. And one of the first persons I met in the US when I came with Dartfish was Sandy Ham, Paul and Morgan Ham's dad. And Paul Ham became an Olympic champion in 2004 in gymnastics, and they're not very tall. So you need good genetics to start with. And then you have some countries who are going to make sure that they find the right people. I'm not going to mention any country here, but some countries are going to already select at a very young age and send them to academies based on these genetics. In weightlifting, it's the same. I have long legs, so I didn't have the right body type to be a good weightlifter, because before you go under, you have to pull everything, and the long legs don't help, or long arms. So you can already look at how the body is structured and knowing if somebody can be good at that sport or not. And they do more and more of that these days. That's the first point. So, and then you may have some, they do DNA analysis now, and I just found out that I have in my genes the muscle component that explosive sprinters have, like elite athletes. I didn't know that because DNA analysis didn't exist back then. But now you can have your kids tested very young, and based on the DNA analysis, make sure you put them in the right, on the right road for career success. Now, what I like, about kids and doing sports is making sure that they do several sports. So Norway is very good for that. In Norway, you cannot do any kind of elite sports before the age of 12, or even being, really focused on one sport. And I keep telling everybody, let them have fun, and, let them do several sports before they are, don't specialize them too young. And I know when you watch the videos of Djokovic at very young age already hitting a tennis racket, you're going to tell me, do we find a lot of athletes who play different sports before? Now, when you look at the build, Nadal, you didn't mention Nadal in your question, because Nadal is different, right? He's at 18, 19, he was already built like a bull, and we see that with the new Spanish player.
Alvarez.
Yes. And I don't like to mention too many names. Like I like your name, Sifu. But it's interesting to see that players these days are incorporating years of research in strength and conditioning, right? I mean, when you look at all the strength coaches now that they have, going to the gym, doing plyometrics, running on the beach with a parachute, you don't have to lift necessarily to go to a gym and lifting heavy weight all the time, but building muscles and building muscles in a way that's going to make them faster, last longer, and less pain. And look at Federer, the discipline he had. Look at Tom Brady at 45. You have to be extremely disciplined if you want to last longer. Back then, because they didn't have this discipline, I don't believe they could last as long. And health is not only doing training like this, is the diet. I have a friend of mine who was the head strength coach of the Chinese volleyball team. And a few years ago, when they were, preparing for Beijing and the Olympics, and one day he told me, I was looking at what they were eating, and they were really eating, candy bars and really not healthy at all. And he told them, okay, girls, I'm going to show you now what we need to do. And he started doing some, using a blender, he started doing some smoothie with veggies and spinach. And they were all laughing because everything was green, and they were drinking that and learning something new. Well, I'm sure when you look at the diet of these top athletes 34 years ago, was not very healthy as compared to what we have today. So I think studies and resources like we have today on strength and conditioning, hydration, nutrition, the importance of electrolyte, and et cetera, are changing the game. And I don't know if anyone would have a chance against a top 20 player going back in time, 50, 60 years ago, and if who would win. I mean, it would be interesting. But I think science, genetics, nutrition, exercising the proper way make us last longer and be different athletes.
You mentioned your background in powerlifting, and I didn't know Jalen Hurts, who's from Texas, who was the quarterback yesterday, who set the record in quarterback touchdowns. He ran for 3 touchdowns. He is a backer. He's 6'1", 223 pounds. He is 24 years of age, from Houston. He has a background in powerlifting. And if you look at his combine, which is the test that they send the draftees to before the NFL draft, against the results of Mahomes, who's the winning quarterback who won a second Super Bowl yesterday, the times and the jumps of Jalen Hurts were superior. Doesn't mean he's a better quarterback. It just means he has different athletic things that I think are directly related to his background in powerlifting. He can jump in the standing broad jump about a foot longer than Mahomes. And Mahomes, I think, was a 6-sport athlete. And I think Jalen Hurts might have been also in high school. They could do track and all these basketball, football, baseball. It's just both of those guys are incredible athletes. And what I like to hear about that is the fact that they did get the time to play many different sports as late as the age of 18 years of age, which you don't hear that in tennis. By the time you're 12 in tennis, you play year round in tennis, and you do physical training and physical therapy and psychological sports psychology counseling. And then you play cards with your friends, and you travel. You're traveling with your parents and your coach to all these events. So I'm glad to see that the NFL, which is this big deal where these careers are typically pretty short. When I was little in the 70s, you might have had an 8 or 12-year career in the NFL. Now the lifespan of the average, take all the positions, it's under 4 years. And it might even be 2 years now. I don't know. But I was glad to see that. And the book that I've spent the last 6 years writing, and I want to release it when I can get the right coverage for my books on. I haven't released it on my own, just by putting it on Amazon. It's called Raising a Child Athlete, ? Things You Need to Know. And it takes examples and observations and experience from coaches, from parents, from athletes, from sports doctors. I interviewed this really cool guy who's a sports podiatrist. I'll put his name down underneath the video. And you can hear the reactions of people talking about where we went wrong within the last 25, 30 years, with taking an athlete and concentrating them on one sport and not letting them be a balanced person, not letting them do yoga retreats, not letting them play with their friends. I think it's okay to blow off steam once in a while, to go to a rave. You don't have to drink and do all these drugs, but stay out all night once in a while and have your mind completely released of everything and be high-fiving and hugging your friends and get safely home after that. But tribal cultures did those things. They did the drum beats. They stayed up all night. They did these things that changed your biochemistry and changed your day-to-day routine. And when you get into the American and European Puritan work ethic, coming from England, coming from Switzerland, Germany, France, coming to America, a lot of those things bred in this idea of life is boring. You do the same thing every day. You go out and feed the cows, you go out and tend the garden, and then you just be quiet and listen to everybody at dinner, and you don't try anything new. And that to me is a problem, and we need to be open to what the universe is giving us. So I went on for quite a while, and tell me if anything of that resonates with you, Victor.
Yes, definitely. First of all, sports, people who play sports are more successful in life when they are, as youth, as young people. It's well documented. There's a lot of research study, not only Richard Branson or the current CEO, of Microsoft, who loves, who played cricket. So when you look at, the NBA, in 75 years, only 4,300 people played in the NBA. And it can be for a day, or it can be for, like our director of basketball, Mark Strickland, for 10 years. And I didn't know that. But when I met Mark, I did some research, and I told Mark, do you know that only 4,300 people played in the NBA in 75 years? And you played 10 years. How many people played more than 1, 2, 3 years? And I said, you are one of a kind. And he said, oh, thank you. And so my point is, if you're, there's very few chances that after high school, first of all, you are going to play in college, and that you're going to make it to the NBA. So the expectations of many parents is crazy. And that can ruin everything. Let them have fun, because by letting them play, and if you can make it through high school and have fun in high school and play for a team in high school, it's a life lesson. And hopefully you can then transport that over the years. If a Tom Brady can still play in the NFL at 45, there's no reason why people should be obese and not go out anymore at a later stage in life. And I think that should be our number one focus, not creating champions. You're the champion of your life. And if you're not healthy when you're 40 and 50, I'm in my 50s, I walk every day, at least 5 miles. Plus I play tennis, I play ping pong, I go to the gym 2, 3 times a week. You can find time. When people tell me I don't have the time, I say, no, you don't think it's necessary to allocate the time to be healthy. And that's bad, because you're going to suffer, you're going to age quicker, and you may die, or you may have Alzheimer develop, quicker as well. I mean, we just launched pickleball, and there are studies showing that people who play a racket sport live 10 to 15 years more than people who don't. So when you read that, you're like, why? And why wouldn't I focus as a parent my kids on a healthy path instead of just trying to make them a champion? So that's what I have to say about that.
I just looked up Richard Branson, so I didn't know he was a kite surfer, but it can be a low impact sport when you've got the outrigger thing. What is the thing called? The keel underneath. They have
Yeah.
it so you're not bouncing like you used to when they built that underneath. So you're a few feet up above the waves, and your keel or rudder, whatever they call that thing, is down below, and that's carving you through. So Richard Branson does that. He's 70 years of age. That's a lot of getting yourself pulled a lot
Yeah,
of balance work and a lot of joy, and cold water is good for you. So
yeah,
that's great. And when you mentioned tennis, I would like to know the longevity of runners versus tennis players. And so I'm going to call it, let's go from recreational to competitive, and let's pick something in the middle of that, so that you're not running competitions all the time and you're not traveling and playing lots of tennis competitions at age 60, because those both would tend to mean that there's more stress involved and that there's could be less recovery involved. So like if you need recovery after a 2 hour match on Saturday and you get to the finals and you don't have the time to recover because you're playing on Sunday, if you're 60 or 70, that might not be good for you, for your heart and the rest of your physiology. So somewhere in between recreational and competitive, a balanced place in between. I'm wondering if the neurology and the camaraderie of being in a tennis group where you may have 16, 20 people where you all know each other and you move around in that little tennis village, if that does anything to us over a
oh
50,
yeah,
60-year career, maybe running, if you're not in a running group and you're doing lots of running on your own, which is not always easy for some of us to run on our own. I'm wondering about the longevity, and not just the longevity, but the wellness component of tennis versus running in that capacity. And if anybody knows that, please send me a link in
yes.
the
Well,
comments below.
you know, look at south of France or Italy where they play bocce balls. You have old people, and
Mhm.
it's proven. There are some studies, and I wrote a blog on pickleball recently. It's on our website, and I looked at the study about you know aging well when you can interact with people. So if you go and run on your own, I think running it's like walking. It's great, but if you are part of a group where you meet other people and can interact and become friends, and after playing tennis and pickleball, you go for a beer and you ask questions, it has additional benefits than just the activity. I think it's very complementary. And if you look at the blog I wrote, there are a few researches that were made and published around this topic. So yes, and I think it's as beneficial to play bocce ball as to play pickleball. Maybe you don't sweat as much, might be better on your knees, but you need a combination. So if you can walk at the same time as you play bocce ball, but having friends is very important. And we live in a society where old people are left alone. You're mentioning how it was in the early days. Well, grandma would still live with their grandkids. They would take care of the kids, and there was a social aspect, and that was the living books that you mentioned at the very beginning of our talk. That doesn't happen anymore. People just leave, and we leave our elderly by themselves. We don't take advantage of what they have to pass to us. We go on TikTok and learn everything from TikTok instead of talking to our parents. It's bad in a way, but I mean, can we fight technology? I don't know about that. But what I know is sports where you can meet other people and become friends and talk is certainly better than just being by yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Victor. I mentioned a psychologist in the beginning, and one thing that I wanted to add to that piece is my budget cannot do everything. I can't do for myself psychologist, life coach, tennis coach, coach, chiropractor, massage therapist, everything. I can't do everything. German classes. I'm studying German. I just can't. You can't do everything. But my tennis coach that I've had here in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, we send each other uh, emails and WhatsApps. We send each other videos. He's reading my book called The Aging Athlete right now because he's 10 years younger than I am. And I'm up to 1,875 athletes since 2009 interviewed, and it could be a world record. And I'm not trying to be a world record. It's just I've been at this thing so long and it's such a passion of mine. I'm trying to learn about why athletes high performance athletes from high school, college, and the pros, and dancers and general contractors called industrial athletes. Why these people stop moving on a regular basis and then go on a downhill slide with motivation, with mindset, with their own attitude, uh, often getting into substances because you tend to replace the high and the endorphins and the camaraderie that you had in athletics with something, has to be replaced by something. Jimmy Connors, whom I mentioned before, got into gambling after he was done with tennis and he was losing money, I think millions. And his wife said, look, she was a nice person, Patty Connors still is. She said, look, honey, you can't keep doing this. You're wrecking us and we can't keep doing this. And I think he says this in his book. And so he had to change. He's been very open about that. I mean, it's an addiction lifestyle, being on the tennis tour to a certain degree and fighting for your life all the time and doing all the practices and travel. And he didn't know what to do after that to replace it, right? So my tennis coach, for my budget, I can get camaraderie, I can get tennis, I can get laughter, I can get support, and I can get some quick pointers about life. And we both share that with each other. I'm a coach, he's a coach. We both share that. And I'm 10 years older, and I'm sharing things that I see in his game and his life. I'm more of a physical trainer and a balanced diet guy. I take siesta. So he's kind of tapping into the little things that I give him, and maybe it will help him now and when he gets to my age. And I think that's very important. So tell us about budget in terms of our hours per day and per week, and financial budget, and some of the things that you found that worked for you and you found that worked for some of the people you're involved in, Victor.
Yes. If you don't want to do anything, you can always find a lot of excuses and reasons why not to do that. And it's amazing the number of people say, "Oh, I don't have time." You have time. Just make it. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30, and before I go to the office, I do my walk. And while I do my walk, I listen to podcasts. I call my mom every day. She's 83, and we speak. And I need to call her every day. It's important to me. And then I listen to podcasts. Sometimes I call friends in Switzerland because of the time difference. And I arrive in the office, and then I start my day. Then I usually take a break during the day for sport. It's very important. I don't believe, that you can just work and be sitting at a desk for 10 hours, 8 hours, and just be productive. I don't believe in that. Now, there are many things you can do on a very low budget. You mentioned pickleball. The pickleball paddle is not that expensive, and you need a good pair of shoes. If you play hockey, if you play, other sports, it might be more expensive. I know being a parent of a tennis player is extremely expensive. Well, that's a different story. But for older people want to stay active. It should not be a question of budget. You can go for a walk with a group of people and say, let's wake up in the morning and let's go for a walk. That doesn't cost anything. Now, it's amazing for me to see that people are going to try to save money on healthy habits, but then they're going to spend money on bad food and things that are not healthy. In the end, it's going to cost you more. If you are sick, if you're obese, I had a dad who had diabetes type 2, and genetically I was at the limit. And now the last time, I checked my glucose level, my blood sugar is great because I'm very active and I pay attention to my diet. But it doesn't need to be, too expensive. So I don't believe that being healthy is an expensive lifestyle. I think it's a choice. And it's just a question of saying, do you want to get broke one day because you have so many hospital bills, or you want to pay attention before? And that's on the mental health, on nutrition, on being, active as well. So time is not a problem. I think it's a question of choice. If you have kids, when I remember when I would bring my son to practice, I would just walk around, leave the coach, dealing with the kids, and you just walk around. You can do, steps. So you can be with your son let him do his practice and do something while he's doing his practice. So you can always find excuses not to be healthy, but I think you can find a lot of ways of, taking care of yourself.
Really good points, Victor. I've watched videos before of people in the inner city, and doesn't need to be in the inner city, it could be anywhere, walking out of a fast food restaurant and they're eating this stuff and they say, I've got to get my fries, I've got to get my burger, I've got to get my big drink, shake, soda, whatever it is. And they're doing this and they're done with the whole thing in like 4 minutes. It's a really quick thing to gulp down. And then they have that giant drink for maybe a half an hour, an hour. And there's a lot of plastic being wasted. Straws we're getting rid of, hopefully, because they're messing up fish and plant life. And they deteriorate the another plastic thing. And I'm looking at these people and I'm saying, did they really think that modern invention of fast food that's fat, salt, and sugar that tweaks our biochemistry actually tastes better than kale done with the right seasonings and some butter and done in a broth? That's a kale, one plant. Spinach, when you cook spinach right with the right seasonings, onions, garlic, seasonings, I don't know what could taste better than that. I'm salivating. I haven't eaten yet since last night at 7, and we're going on 11, a little over after 11. So I've already done more than 12 hours of fasting. My salivary glands are ready for that kale and ready for the meat. I'm a meat eater. It works well for my system. I'm not saying what I do is good for the environment, but this is what works for my system. And I'm wondering what these people would think if you sat them down and gave them a really organic, healthy, fresh plant, fresh meat, fresh bread type of a diet. Would they still say that about their conditioning to believe that fast food and the food science that went into that fast food is actually superior? And if not, how long would it take to change their habits to me teaching them how to cook things? You can take one frying pan, put all that stuff in there with some broth and water and seasoning, and you put another frying pan on top. That's one of the ways I love to cook, because it cooks it on low heat and it cooks it with time, not with fried oil. And it's a slower way to cook it, but you can turn it off after like 4 minutes and it just keeps cooking itself because you've got that top on it and it just keeps going. And then you eat it and it's lovely. So tell me if you ever had to experience teaching somebody how to eat properly and cook properly, or for yourself, and what this whole fast food and quick and easy lifestyle is all about, in your opinion.
Yes, well, I'm a parent. So as a dad, I always, taught my kids to eat healthy. It's not easy because the processed food tastes good. And then you give a habit to kids of, hey, let's go to McDonald's. It's fun, and you have a burger, and they love the taste. They love the taste of ketchup, and they love the taste of sugar. I always said, as soon as I came to the US, I said, there's a simple law we should pass: is the cheapest food on the menu should be the healthiest. And that would make a lot of changes, because a lot of people don't have, a lot of money. So it's easy. You go to one of these fast food chains and you buy a burger for $1 and you have a drink. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't cook, or they come home and they may not have their parents at home to cook for them. Or they just have $5. They go and they buy something to eat. If I know that on the menu, I have a healthy choice, like some salad, something healthy, with not too much sugar, that might be the menu I get my kids, because I'm trying to save some money and because I don't have the means. And that gives a good, taste in people's mouth, and then get a better habit. That's what I would do. That would be a very smart law, and I don't know if it would be easy to pass. But, you can do it, but it requires discipline and time. And when you watch TV and all you see are these frozen pizzas and and all this processed food. Yes, we are in a marketing society, and people are going to say, I want to taste that, I want to try that. Cereals in the morning that look like rainbows. I mean, you have things you eat that don't even exist in nature, the color, purple and whatever it is, but it's full of sugar, and kids love sugar, and parents are lazy and they just give that to their kids. But it's education in the end. And I just read recently that the colon cancer in younger people in their 30s and 40s have gone up dramatically as compared to our age, because when we were kids we were eating healthier. It's dramatic. Who's going to pay for that and all this life lost and the suffering? So hopefully now we start changing and adapting. I think people are realizing that what we have been eating for the past 30, 40 years have not been, it's not been great. Now, fast food can be healthy. I don't like to name brands, but Chipotle is an example. It's pretty healthy. They have good fast food. So it can be fast food without being, the bad stuff you find in fast food. If you are limited in terms of time, but it might be a little bit more expensive. I know that, a lot of these burgers chains that you can find. I mean, there are some chains I've never been to, but when I look at the menu, I'm like, you look at a small meal of 1,000 fried calories, and everything is bad for you. The oil they use, as you mentioned, and and kids don't know. Maybe the parents don't even know. So I think as a society, we should make it a rule saying you can serve your stuff, but the cheapest menu should be healthy. And that would help, I believe.
Yeah, there's this idea that's been around for quite some time about programming society to do what you want it to do. And if you're in a controlling body, like the food pyramid that comes from the United States government, it's been compromised since it began. It's got the things that out of proportion. We don't need all of the milk and all of the grains. Those are two things that you could remove from the food pyramid, and the holistic nutritionist, not the funded nutritionist that grew up in a compromised society and have textbooks paid by the big agricultural companies. But you can eliminate things, but the programming that we have that's run by the big sellers, the soy, we've got all this corn-fed and soy-fed animals out there that we're eating their meat. One study I saw, a scientist took samples of someone from their tissue, and they said, you are 40% GMO chicken that's been raised on GMO grains
Very,
and things.
yeah.
You are 30% GMO, factory farm beef, and it's in our system. They can track with nanotechnology. They can track how much of our tissue is made up of which animal or which corn we were eating. And to me, we're like a Frankenstein monster, starting in the 1960s through 80s. And we didn't know it when I was a kid. We thought we were eating pretty healthily, but the big agricultural companies were already in control of the foods that we were eating back then.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Switzerland. The beef I had growing up was grass-fed. I mean, you mentioned the big cows in Austria, the
Austria.
same in the Swiss Alps, right? You see these cows, and all they do all summer long is eat grass. And I mean, maybe they get a little bit of grains in the winter, but putting all these cows in one region and just feeding them corn, it's not what a cow does in nature. So I'm glad that, we spoke the other day about nitrates and nitrites in the food to conserve the meat. And now I'm so glad that finally they realize that, wow, there's a big cause of cancer, colon cancer, with these products. Now, everywhere I go now, you see, it's free of those. And that's important because you cannot feed people and then try to cure them 20, 30 years later because they get a bad colon cancer. That's a different story. I don't want to be too, political on this, but
Yeah, if we make the right choices and we buy the right foods, it will change the industry. They have to follow the money. So you can see in the large supermarkets that the health sections have been growing for the
yes,
last 20 years. So that's good. People's demand is driving that.
it's like eggs.
There-
When I buy my eggs, and I understand that when you have a big family, it's very tempting to buy these eggs that come in large boxes and they don't cost much. Now, price of eggs have gone up and people complain, but I'm like, it's you go to a Starbucks and you buy a coffee for $6 and you're going to complain because you have to pay the same for 12 eggs. Doesn't make much sense. But I always try to get the eggs that are from chicken that are outdoor eating worms and bugs. And when you crack them, I always tell people, if the eggs looks like the play button on SportsEdTV, orange, almost orange, then it's a good egg. If it's light yellow, most likely you're not eating anything. And and yes, maybe the egg costs a little bit more, but again, the health benefits that you are going to have, is. But it's a question of education, and we have a lot of these blogs on SportsEdTV. So,
You
yes.
told me that the trajectory of SportsEd's TV, the videos had a lot to do with the modern forehand and backhand tennis. And I just want to be fair to Roger Federer that I said that Djokovic was more of an outlier than Federer, but what I should probably say to amend that statement is that there was a progression from Connors. McEnroe is not in the progression. He was an outlier with incredible gifts. He did a lot of things right, but a lot of things he invented for himself, and they might not work for many people, even though lots of people in my era modeled our games after McEnroe. And for a guy who was recreational and didn't have some huge athletic ability, I think I really did pretty well with the McEnroe stuff when I was in my early 20s, and thanking him for that. I'm a righty, he's a lefty. But then Lendl took some of the Borg stuff and advanced the physical training, got the massage, outworked everyone else, and he developed what he did, which was the the harder hitting, the more powerful strokes, the more penetrating balls. So each person did their thing. Becker, very athletic, had a big body and did the athletic training and was able to dive gracefully like a person who weighed 150 pounds. So he advanced the game. And then Sampras came along and took all of that and the calmness of Borg and the quietness, and he advanced it, but the racket technology wasn't there yet. Federer played with the same racket, the Wilson Pro Staff that Sampras was using, and then somehow he invented, I guess, maybe his coach did, I don't know. He invented the modern game off taking what all these other people who had come before him was able to do and got his shoulder in front of the ball that Sampras did. He hit the ball a little bit further back. So he advanced it, and then these other players we mentioned, including Djokovic, came along and they put it all together in this beautiful way. So tell us a little bit about that. We'll wind it down with that statement of how your SportsEdTV developed because of the modern video and the Federer type of tennis streams.
Well, I saw some pictures and videos of Borg having something very similar as well. It's pretty amazing at contact and the follow through. So looks like a lot of good players already had that, even if it was not named the modern game day or day game. What you see in every sport, in many sports, is like the technique evolves. And I think because video was not here before, and being able to film a lot and analyze what other players did. Like John Eagleton would take a lot of videos watching the players on TV and more games and developed his modern day game. He didn't invent it. He just took whatever good players were doing and teaching it, because he said that's a success. And it's the same in many other sports. I think, the equipment is getting better. We can watch what the good ones are doing. And when we can apply new coaching techniques based on what the good teams do without necessarily knowing what they are doing at that time, So I think it has to do with visualization, technology, and the fact that we make players last longer and better on many different fronts. Nutrition, hydration, strength and conditioning in general, makes this player getting better on many different fronts. So everything combined, brings better athletes. Now, you always have outliers at any time. Remember Bo. Bo, who else has got to that point where you can be MVP in football and in Major League Baseball at the same time?
Bo Jackson.
Yeah, Bo Jackson. And if you take Bo Jackson today, and I don't know if you really train like top athletes do today, but you bring a Bo Jackson. How old is he now? Around 60.
He's about my age. He'd probably be 60 or 61.
Yeah, but he didn't need. He was just exceptional. But you bring a Bo Jackson today with what they give athletes and the exercise regimen. He could even play the third sport and be an MVP. He was just amazing. But a lot of athletes back then, I always love to watch Olympic footage from 1924 or 1936, and of course, you have the Jesse Owens of their time, and the question is, would he beat Usain Bolt? Now, with the right equipment and the same type of training, I'm sure he would. So it's interesting. I think equipment has a lot to do. Nutrition and strength and conditioning has a lot to do to bring them to that point.
Yeah, I was going to wind it down, but I want to touch one more thing that just popped in my head. And I'm so grateful for these conversations, because when you're speaking and we're tapping into things at a very deep level, I sometimes find an answer. So I was thinking about the sport of boxing, and the sport of boxing did not have to evolve the way the sport of golf and tennis and some of these other sports do. I think it's because of the equipment. Um, Tennis also and golf, they didn't do a lot of physical training back in the day, but boxing they did. And they knew what worked. And there were so many people who were boxing. There were way more than playing tennis. In 1910, it was the biggest sport. I think boxing in America and maybe in Europe also was the biggest sport until somewhere around the late 50s or 60s, because every kid, their dad taught them the fighting sports. They had it in school, and there were prize fighters that could make a lot of money. Prize fighters in 1890, 1910 were world famous people, like a Humphrey Bogart in the 1930s was. Everybody knew them. They were in the papers. The people knew about their lives, what girlfriend, who they were marrying, where they were flying to Paris, Munich, and New York, wherever. So it was a really popular thing. There was a lot of coaching, and there was a lot of teaching about this, and there was ability to see what was working and what wasn't. But if you just take Muhammad Ali and Larry Holmes, two very similar boxers, Muhammad Ali had better footwork. Larry Holmes had a better right hand than Muhammad Ali. They both had pretty similar jabs. I'm not sure about their reach, but it's within, I would guess, within 2 inches of each other. And Larry Holmes was Muhammad Ali's sparring partner. And in the beginning, Muhammad Ali was better, even though he had retired and came back. But Larry Holmes caught up to him very quick because he put all his energy. He's 5, 6 years younger. And so he was able to take it and do some incredible things. But those people to teach skills in boxing, you don't need to advance beyond Muhammad Ali and Larry Holmes, and you could pick somebody else, um, Marciano, a 186-pound person from Boston. His defense of getting down is very similar to Floyd Mayweather's boxing getting down. Mayweather, when he gets into a situation where he's in trouble, he just takes his whole upper body and he bends down, and it makes it illegal to hit him because it's illegal in boxing to hit in the back of the head. I think he shouldn't be allowed to do that. I think he should be able to go into somebody's chest, but I don't think you should be able to bow down and turn your body into a 90-degree angle like he does, but that's what he does. So all of those things predate the modern era, the 60s and 70s. You did not have to advance in boxing. What happened in boxing is some of the people like the Klitschko's and the current three big names in boxing are really big people. So that's something that could have happened in the 60s or 70s if you found people who were agile and you taught them to train like Muhammad Ali's and Marciano's. They were just bigger people. So I don't think boxing has evolved the way that these other sports have with all this technology and all this cross training, because boxing, they're already skipping rope. They already have people who could dance, like the middleweight champion, Sugar Ray Robinson. He was a great dancer. So they already knew that stuff back in the 1940s through 60s. So tell me what your thoughts are on my
I,
little boxing
I, it's,
diatribe.
I agree. I mean, I always, I dream about it, Mike Tyson at his best against Muhammad Ali and see who would win. And hard to say, and there's a big gap in age and, when they played. What is interesting in boxing is, when you watch the Rocky Balboa movies, you see he drinks his eggs, and so the protein, and that boxing was the first sport where they use videos, because when you box, you cannot box more than maybe 3 times a year. You cannot do more because you have to recover. If you got punched a lot, you cannot just go back on the ring. When you do any other sports, you can play every week, but not really boxing. So it's interesting that they were using videos at a very early stage back then in 1900s, early 1900s, to try to see, what the other player or boxer would do, because for scouting.
Using the film.
Yes, they were using the film. That's very interesting. But I agree with you. Marciano against Muhammad Ali against Tyson would be interesting to see who would win. Yeah, it's a good point. I don't think technology has really evolved in the boxing world as it has evolved in other sports.
It doesn't need to, because it was already so advanced.
Yes.
Yeah. There's no equipment. It didn't need to evolve because they did all of the footwork. They did all of the training. The people who were not heavyweights didn't want to put on a lot of muscle. They wanted to drop down in weight and be really quick, just like Jimmy Connors, the era of skinny tennis. They wanted that rotational, that movement. They did not want to be clunky. And the bigger boxers like Lennox Lewis, I don't know how much weight training he did. I don't think Tyson did very much. Tyson, when he was age 12, he was 194 pounds already. He was ready at age 20 to 24 to be the best that he could be. Lennox Lewis was a late bloomer, incredible skills, but he fights Lennox Lewis like the fighters from the 1920s. He keeps his hands way out in front, and he says his philosophy is if you're here, it takes you that much longer to get to the person. So he's going to keep them away with a jab that's way out front, and he's a 6'4" plus, maybe 6'5", huge muscles everywhere. I mean, what a specimen that guy is. Incredible.
And then you had Butterbean, who was a beast, right?
Who knows how to move his body with all that fat.
Yes.
And how do they do that? Well, I know a friend of mine who's really agile, and he's pretty much good at any sport that he picks up, and he's good at darts. We have a friend that we were playing golf with who's almost twice the size of this guy, with muscle everywhere, big head, everything. And this guy is better at darts than my friend. He's a large person. So, it doesn't matter. Like Butterbean and some of these large people, they've got agility that's natural agility, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, now what they do now is, vision training. So you have these tools like, the Fit Light system, where you can really improve on your vision and the fastness. And I know that UFC boxing uses that. You may have the right nutrition for you to last longer as well. So there's a lot of technology and scouting with videos. With Dartfish, we did video analysis and tagging every single match to see, to find tendencies. Like, that this boxer is going to do, left, and then a jab. Or, if he's down in the points and he knows it, how is he going to modify his game? So if you know that ahead of time as a coach, you can tell your athletes, watch out. He's going to, most likely, that's what he's going to do next. That didn't exist before. So that can give them the edge. But otherwise, in terms of body type and strength and speed, I think you're right, because there's no equipment as such. Like even in running, you have different shoes. Where they run is different. So it's difficult to analyze what would have happened before versus now. But yeah.
So Usain Bolt versus Jesse Owens, there have been some scientific sports science looking into that. And what they found is that the tracks that Jesse Owens ran on were less responsive. Your time on the foot would be longer back then, and then your explosiveness on your next move would be slower. So his times were incredible, Jesse Owens. And so what somebody did is they compared that to Usain Bolt and the other top runners of the last 20 years. And I think they said that Jesse Owens was comparable. This is something I read 4 years ago. So if there's some new sports science on this, I'm open to see that. So Jesse Owens was an outlier. He had such efficiency in his running that he could have been part of any generation of running. And he didn't need any shoe technology change or form technology change. He just needed a different track to run on. And then, get to sleep the night before and not have all the racism that he had to deal with, which definitely weighed on his mind. So that was a weight on poor Jesse Owens.
I don't know if it was a weight or a pull, because I can tell you, if you're a Black American running in 1936 in Nazi Germany, I think you wanted to win. And you may have wings just because of that.
You may have wings.
Yeah.
So I am reaching out, as you know, for more interesting people who like to go deep in various fields. We're dealing with motivation, sports science, doctors, and athletes, and all the people involved in that, even promoters. I would like to talk to some promoters about the history of putting on events, putting together a league. Maybe the pickleball people, if they come out talking about how they started their leagues and how they made a sustainable sport, that would be some fun conversations to hear. So those are some things I'm reaching out for. And then also if athletes want to tap into me for some of my balance, some of my Sifu guru type stuff, so that they can maintain that connection to the good in life and not go down too far into anything that's a little bit excessive. That's something that they could tap into me through my website, SifuSlim.com. And maybe tell me, Victor, if you're reaching out for anything personally or for your business that you'd like to share with the people on the internet.
Yes. So first of all, I'm going to send some people your way. I think they have a lot to share. I was mentioning Mark Strickland, 10 years in the NBA. He's a great speaker, and you're going to have a lot of fun with him. So you should do an interview with him as an example. And we look forward to having you as well as one of our senior contributors on SportsEdTV, where you can share your knowledge and whatever you learned over these decades with our audience. So I look forward to it.
Yeah, let's do it, Victor. And it's been fun. Victor and I have been speaking French on the phone for a week or two, and that's been fun. And you need to keep your ability up in the things that you spent all these years doing. And so French and Spanish, and now I'm learning German. I got to keep on all these things as the clock keeps ticking. And it's good for our neurology as we age to have little excitement, a little tapping into different parts of our brain chemistry to keep challenging it and keep. When I get the chance and I hear back from Victor that my French is doing well, it feels like something I'm doing is working. So you got to keep that up.
Yes, definitely. Learning a second language can help you if you have a stroke one day. That's what I learned. And it's like playing with your left hand, doing a lot of things with your left hand if you're writing, like brushing your teeth or playing tennis or whatever. So, but your French is just amazing. I was very, very surprised when you started talking French and the way you say the R's, and it's very impressive.
C'est impressionnant ce que je dis, n'est-ce pas?
Oui, vraiment.
Okay, we'll sign off. So you know how to find Victor and you know how to find Sifu. And thanks for listening. And please please subscribe, and visit their website and take a look and keep on learning, because learning is so fun to be excited. It gives you excitement. And who doesn't want excitement?